All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of my journey towards helping students better understand the material that will be presented in the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies course and the AWD 1111 Database-Driven Web Development course, I'm creating a series of video presentations that are based on the ebooks created by Mr. Flavio Copes. So far, I have completed 4 of his books: the HTML ebook, the CSS ebook, the JavaScript ebook. So I guess those 3, and I'm almost through with the 4th, ES5 to ESNext. It's got 84 pages in it, and I'm on page 69. Now we're going to talk about ES 2018. All right. So as mentioned there, it introduced the concept of the REST element when working with array destructuring. Take a look at what you can do now. All right. Now, we're going to need to go over a lot of these, on a lot of samples and examples, and we will. All right. So there's REST properties, and there's spread properties, as it says, to allow to create a new object by combining the properties of an object passed after the spread operator. We've talked quite a bit in here about asynchronous, and this is asynchronous iteration. It says the new construct for await of allows you to use an async iterable object as the loop iteration. All right, so you'll notice in here we've got the for await. It says since this uses await, you can only use it inside of an async function, like you would a normal await. All right. Promise.prototype.finally. When a promise is fulfilled, it calls the then methods one after the other. If something fails during these calls, the then methods are jumped and the catch method is executed. Finally allows you to run some code regardless of whether the promise made it all the way through and was, all right, fulfilled successfully, or whether it was rejected. It's very similar to the finally that you'd have in a try-catch. ES 2018 introduced a number of regular expression or regex improvements. Again, Flavio has got a tutorial on those, but looking at a couple of these. Regexp, look behind assertions, match a string depending on what precedes it. All right, forwards or backwards. Again, I've never used any of this stuff. Look behinds is a new feature that you can do forward or backwards. In a regular expression pattern, you can use \d to match any digit, \s to match any character that's not white space, and \w to match any alphanumeric character. The new feature, it says here, extends this concept to all Unicode characters with this, and all non-Unicode characters, which is here. Any Unicode character has a set of properties. For example, it says here, script determines the language family. ASCII is a Boolean that's true for ASCII characters, and there's others. In ES 2018, a capturing group can be assigned to a name rather than just being assigned to a slot in a result array. So here's your pattern. Here is running that pattern or executing it against this, and here's keeping the results. And as they're saying now, that when you do this, you can kind of set this up to break it down into its components or its pieces. All right, the S flag, short for single line, causes a dot to match new line characters as well. Without it, the dot matches regular characters, but not a new line. So that's pretty much it until we get to ESNext. So this is the latest and greatest. ESNext, as it says, is a name that always indicates the next version of JavaScript. The current version, when this was written, was 2018. All right. And so ESNext, which I believe has already been released. In fact, I think ES20 has, and so has ES21. All right. As they mention here, proposals to the ECMAScript standard, they're organized in stages, where stages 1 to 3 is an incubator of new features, so kind of a testing area. And stage 4 is when they're finalized. At the time of this writing, it says there are a number of features in stage 4. So most of this, if not all of this stuff, would already be in there. And again, I've not used array.prototype flat map. I've not used optional catch binding. Or object from entries. All right, so that's pretty much it. So there's some string stuff in here. Okay, it says this feature has been part of Chrome for almost a year now. It's going to be standardized. Trim start to return a string with a remove white space from the original. All right, trim end to remove it from the end. Symbol.property description. So there's a lot of stuff that we are going to have to work on and look at. But one thing that I should tell you right offhand, and that is nobody knows everything, least of all me. All right. So and don't think that you can memorize everything, because it just doesn't happen. All right. Half the time the battle is knowing where to go when you do need to look for something. So to finish this up, some JSON or JavaScript object notation improvements. It says before this change, the line separator and paragraph separator symbols were not allowed in strings parsed in JSON. They would result in a syntax error, but they now parse correctly. Okay. And again, with some of this stuff, you might look at it and go, well, who cares? Depending on what you're doing, and if this is what you do for a living, you might care quite a bit. All right. Well-formed JSON.stringify fixes the JSON.stringify output when it processes surrogate UTF code points. Before this change, calling JSON.stringify would return a malformed Unicode character. Now, it does not. And lastly, function.prototype.toString says functions have always had an instance method called toString, which returned a string containing the function code. ES 2019 introduced a change to the return value to avoid stripping comments and other characters like white space away from there. And that's it. So I have now completed. Let me move this one over. So I've now done the first 4. I've got the HTML handbook done, the CSS handbook, the JavaScript Beginner's handbook, and now JavaScript from ES5 to ESNext, which puts me into the next 3, which are basically all, they're introduced in chapter 18, the last chapter of our JavaScript book. But NODE.JS handbook, Express handbook, and React are all things that, at least for the present, are more in the AWD 1111 course. All right, so I'll continue on with that shortly.